So what do you want to cover today? Today, because it's Saturday, it's a weekend, we don't want to cover too many technical things. We thought perhaps let's just go back and revise, but also go forward in at the same time. And I'm glad that those of you who really attended last night, you will still have a good memory of what we just covered yesterday. Maybe let's just go back there, because there were some few students who would like to adjust their research proposal, not to change it, just to adjust it in terms of the understanding. Again, let me just warn students that this is not the only process that a research proposal is all about. You are welcome to adapt it to any other theory that is acceptable within the discipline that you work in. But it's always advisable to understand the completeness of the process. So please, as you do your own adjustment to the research process, remember to understand the processes from the beginning to the end. So as to who the authors or your sources are, you won't go wrong with it. So there's no right or wrong answers in terms of the research process, but there's a generally acceptable process that should be followed up to the end of it. Otherwise then we go back to the earlier argument of doing things for this, which are non-scientific, yet you want to claim them to be in the scientific space. So just be mindful of that. Now, we did cover the research problem. And again, I just want you to remember that a problem is not defined by anybody else, but is defined by you as a researcher. So in other words, you're sitting at home, you want to qualify as a whatever student that you are busy with, whatever program that you're working on, and you've got something that you've got interest in. So your interest and my interest and Godfrey's interest and Chili's interest and Mapita's interest may not necessarily be the same. So research is, it's so wild. You can do whatever you want to do and nobody can blame you, because other people are interested more in the animal space, other people are more interested in the plant spaces and so on. So there's enough to cover in research. So when it comes to a problem, yes, it is important for you to remember that it is something that you must at least have interest in, or some problem that you want to solve yourself, because then it makes it easier, as you go through the other steps. The goal of your research is very important. Again, we want to reiterate, you need to have a goal that is broad enough, because if it's broad enough for the starters, you're then able to come up with objectives. And sometimes the objectives that you're going to come up with, there's no number. There's just a principle to say, the SMART principle, that they must be specific, they must be measurable, and all those principles. So, but otherwise, you have to have those objectives. The reason why you need objectives is that they are going to guide you as you develop questions that you want to ask during the collection of data. Because when you've got specific objectives, then you know the kind of questions that you're going to ask. Otherwise, if you don't have the objectives and you are now interviewing people or you're sending questionnaires, it will be very difficult as to how to guide yourself. Because at the end of the day, when we look at your report, we look at what were the objectives and have you, what do you say in relation to these objectives? In other words, what was the aim of your research and what were the objectives of the research, and have those objectives been met? So that's important to note. Now, we will talk more about the literature review, but again, I just want to go back to what we said. When you look at the literature review, you go and read on your chosen research problem or on your topic. You walk into the library, you meet the librarian, and you give a librarian what you're looking for in terms of sources. The librarian will then be able to help you to identify sources, whether it's books, whether it's articles, journals, or what have you. So you'll have a whole a whole floor full of resources. If you go to UNISA, for example, it's full of resources that relate to your problem. But I also have my own list that is, my boot is full of resources that relate to my problem. And so is everybody else. I just want to encourage you as students to really spend time talking to librarians. They are extremely, extremely helpful in terms of your study. You need to ask them, because the reason why universities and institutions have libraries is that those librarians are technically people that are supposed to support your studies. And maybe let me just pause here now that I'm on this item of the library and find out how many of you have spent at least few seconds or minutes talking to a librarian about your study field, and what is your experience, or what was your experience, especially for those of you who have done a proposal already, if you have engaged them, and what if you have not, what do you think should happen? Let me pause here on the literature review.
I attended a library workshop that was more about how to search for material, and that's the first point. And the librarian was saying, if you do have problems in the process of your accessing the library, you can have a personal talk with the librarian, whereby they can assist in any area where you are facing a problem. Thank you.
You're saying
Sorry.
you've got budget constraints, and
Yeah, I'm just giving a budget constraint as an example, that
yes,
you realize during the course of the study that one objective cannot be covered, but you can still work towards the aim without that one particular objective. Will that work negatively towards your scoring at the end, or will it still be fine?
scoring. What do you mean scoring, Kusin? Remember,
Uh,
you say you've got 5 objectives and you're unable to meet all 5.
yeah.
So you will then only report. Are you what?
On
I'm not sure whether when you say scoring, what do you mean by
You
that?
will report on 4. When they mark your thesis at the end of
Oh,
the day,
oh,
will
okay.
they
No,
compare the
remember.
initial proposal and then the thesis at the end?
Oh, okay. No. I don't know the necessary marking processes themselves, but I can speak generally about the research objectives. In terms of the research objectives, you set them up, and if along the way you encounter one or those challenges, one of which is budget, we'll talk about it a lot more when we get to the limitations. So then you report it under the limitation of the study. Every
Oh,
study, every
okay,
study
thank
has
you.
a limit. Every study has a limitation. It's almost like your scope. So you wanted to build this, but you ended up, making small adjustments. Then you explain how did you not, meet all your objectives. Because as a researcher, you will also be expected to report on your own experiences as well. So you have to report about it, because it's something that you stated that you'll do at the beginning. So yes, you can. But let's go back to the library. Have you made use of the library and a librarian in your studies so far, and what is your experience?
Okay, I have used the librarian, and then it did help me to able to get the information I was looking for. So it was helpful on my side to be able to get to get more literature about the topic that I'm focusing on.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, I want to encourage anybody who's doing research, particularly some of you who are saying you're doing dissertation, to really understand that the role of a librarian, any librarian, is to support you and your studies. If I'm now going to to tell you how valuable the librarian is to your study. I think that on its own will be a lecture. But I want you to take a journey, go to a library, whether you're looking for journals, you're looking for books, you're looking for any kind of electronic material. It will also assist you because part of the important technical area for your work is referencing. So when you go to the librarian, you're already beginning to get assisted on the issues around referencing. And if UNISA is making services like those, and not only UNISA, by the way, but you are in UNISA, but when it makes services like those available, it is for you as students to really make use of them, enjoy them. It's like your librarian is like your personal PA who goes into the library, gets the books for you, give them to get some sources for you. So when you're home, you're not stressing about whether you've got sufficient material or not. You stress about, oh, I've got a lot of material to condense and read into, package into my research area. So please make a journey to the library, because there's a reason why you are studying. Apart from the fact, Cousin, that you want to not to be penalized or something when you have not achieved your 5 objectives. It's also for you to gain knowledge and to understand how all these things are put together, so that tomorrow when we read your dissertations, because believe you me, dissertations are being read. I mean, the research reports are being read all the time. You are then able to look at it and say, wow, at least I have moved from this point to that point and I know better today. So I want you, just as an assignment, that this year, when you, at some point when we get the literature review, some of you will talk to me about how you are interacting with the librarians that are employed to support research students in the main. And I'm saying institutions do invest a lot in that and in the material in the library, not just for decorations, but for really researchers to go and really run them through. It's a minefield. Now, when you go to a library and you look at how much they have invested in there, I'm sure libraries are worth millions and millions, because those resources are huge assets. So I'm challenging you really to go back to the library and ask the librarian to assist you, particularly when it comes to your research processes. Okay. Hopefully I have done a lot of marketing for the librarians. So yeah, good for them. Now, when it comes to the research design, it's a technical definition, which simply means a plan, a research plan. So you have to develop a plan. Now, during the course of this program, we're going to be talking about research design. And please remember, every time we use the word research design, we really mean a plan that you put together yourself on how you want to go and address the problem. And here, that's where you're going to hear a lot about, and this research design on its own, you're going to hear a lot about whether you're going to go qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods, sampling, all those things we're gonna talk about, because that's part of your plan. How do you envisage that you're going to move and address the problem? So that's where we're really gonna have a long engagement. And even for those of you who have really done a dissertation, I'm sure when you got the research design, it was quite it must have been quite exciting and challenging, and I don't know how you experienced it. And once you have come up with a plan, then the next process, or the next step of the process, is collection of data. When you then go and collect data, that's where you need to know what kind of instruments are you going to use to collect data relating to your problem. And here we're gonna start moving into what is the quantitative instruments that you can use to collect data. What are the qualitative instruments that you can use to collect data? what are the mixed methods tools that you can use to collect data. So when you go to collect, because you've got a plan, you are now following that plan. You are now going and interview, or you are now going to distribute whatever process that you are going to follow. You're now going to your target and you're going to work with them. So there's a plan that is expected of you in terms of how you are going to collect data. Whether it's qualitative or quantitative or mixed method doesn't matter, but it must be from the plan. Now, you've now collected data using whatever instrument that you used, whatever software, electronic software that you are following, and so on. Now it's sitting with you. Remember, we said you have to interpret it. So uninterpreted data is useless. But here we say before you interpret it, analyze it yourself. Put it down, analyze it, let it make sense. The analysis is another step or plan that we want in terms of your research design. What was the plan that you said you're going to follow to analyze data? So now you take that data, you put it into your plan, and it must make sense to you. It must then start talking to you because you are now analyzing it. And the analysis will be talking to us from the very simple data information to the most complex data. So you'd go through that, and it's your data. So you are the one now who's working through it. Then when all that is said and done, we look at application now. How do you interpret the meaning of this data as it relates to the problem? So in other words, you're sitting with data now, it talks to you, you've analyzed it, but how do you relate it to the problem? Because you're not just going to analyze it for the fun of it. You have to analyze it to say, what problem were you trying to solve? And what does this data say relating to that problem? Are we able to see a solution to the problem or not? So let's take an example. When scientists get together and they look at the virus that is currently ravaging the world, they put it together through the whole process. And when they come to application, they need to tell us, how does this now data that they are sitting with assist in solving the problem that is the virus? So you'll forever hear or see that there's going to be engagements, because then there is a whole lot of genomics and changes and variable. So that things move. Things are not the same. And I again want to challenge you to go back to the point of the library, because when you go to the library and you're looking for a book that was written in 1810, you compare that book to the book that is written in 2022, and the amount of knowledge that happened in between all those, it's amazing. So that's why you've got people who are studying history, you've got people who are studying anthropology, sociology, business management, and so on and so on. The reason is things are not static. They are really moving ahead. So the reality that I'm trying to share with you is, at the point of a research report, that's what we are interested in. When we read your research report, we want to see all these processes being put into the report so that we can understand them. And the research report that becomes the outcome of all the work. Now you're documenting all what you've gone through. And for people and for your lecturer and for everybody else to see and read for themselves. And I think for academic purposes, that's where the marking comes in. Because after you followed all these steps, then they will be able to allocate you a percentage as to what was the performance. But you're not going to get all this as perfect. All what we are trying to say now is that it's just for you to understand the process as it's unfolded. Hopefully now that has clarified the research process. Now let's just look at some of the elements of a research proposal. We just want to look at them perhaps in a little bit more details now. I've taken this from Barbie as an author, so you're welcome to use the source or other sources. Let's look at the problem or the objective. You spoke about the objective earlier. What exactly do you want to study? You must ask yourself that question. What is it that you want to study? You need to know, why is it for you worth studying? So in other words, you ask yourself a question: what is it that I want to study? why is it that this that I want to study is worth studying? Does the proposed study have practical significance, or does it contribute to the construction of social theories? Those are just basic questions that you ask yourself, that why am I studying what I'm studying? Do I want to influence practice, or do I want to contribute the construction of theories? Of course, at the end of the day, you can also study because you want to pass a subject. You want to do well. But research here, when we say you want to study, remember we are talking research as you are undertaking it. We are not taking research as a subject that you are studying, because obviously your objective as a student, I think, is to really do well on the subject. But when you then undertake research, those questions become relevant. So I wanted to separate between you as a student, where your objective is to do well in the exam, of course, but also as a researcher, so that you then say, what do I want to study? Because this is a different question to why are you studying the program that you are studying. Apart from, I'm saying the obvious answer for you is, I want to pass, I want to do well with it. So please use these objectives just to ask yourself from time to time. It's just some way to check whether you are motivated enough with your problem or not. When it comes to literature review, you then go and you say, what have other people before me said about this topic? Because it is very rare to find that you are studying something that was never studied before. Not easy. So you then have to go and ask yourself, and that's where the librarian comes in. Do we have other people who have studied what I'm studying now? It's a yes. If it's a yes, the question then is, what have they said about this topic or this problem that I'm interested in? What theories address it, and what do they say? So are the theories about this? Yes. If they are, what is it that they are saying about this area of my study? What do they say? What did they establish as a discipline relating to the area that I'm studying? What previous research exists? Are there any research that were done before that exist? And if they do, you also reflect on how does it relate to your current situation that you are in. Are there consistent findings, or do past studies disagree? In other words, do they find similar things, those that have studied this before, or do they then find different things? Or do they agree? Do they disagree? Where do they stand? Disagreement in research is encouraged. Agreement in research is encouraged. So there's nothing wrong when past researchers or findings have been found to be contradictory. So you need to know that. You need to, in your literature review, you can ask yourself those questions. Are there flaws in the body of the existing research that you think you can remedy? In other words, you pick up things that perhaps they did not do, that you think, okay, you can actually address that flaw. Because yes, some years back I might have studied this, but today, perhaps given the circumstances that we find ourselves in, you pick up that there was actually a flaw in that body of existing research. And that's the part that you say, okay, I picked up this, and this is where your niche as a researcher is. So in other words, you are just going to focus on remedying that flaw empirically. So you can also do that in your preparation for your research proposal. Whom or what will you study in order to collect data? So you need to know the subject of your study. Is it people or is it things that you are going to collect data from? I mean, people study cars, so they want to compare different kind of vehicles as opposed to that. Other people is about people. So you need to know what is your subject. Other people just look at documents. Other people just do. So it's about knowing the subject for study. So you have to identify the subjects in general, in theoretical terms, then in specific, more concrete terms. So you start just by generally looking at, okay, there are cars, then you move into theoretical terms as to, is a motor vehicle or a mode of transportation and so on. And then you start moving in more into concrete terms. You identify who is available for your study and how will you reach them. So it's important for you to know the more concrete and specific terms, because if you want to go and study the Russians that are attacking the Ukrainians, or the Ukrainians that are suffering from the Russian invasion, it might actually be difficult for you as a student, because the first question we're going to say is, well, are they available for you to study them, and how will you reach them? So it might actually not be feasible, just as a point as an example. So basically you need to then ask yourself, will I be able to get my study subjects available? And will I reach them? Because it's you as a researcher now who needs to start thinking about how you're going to get there. And I think this then just brings me to the question that you was asked, Kusing, about objectives that you have not met. Because then the question will be, how did you in your research proposal define your subject for study? Because if you say no, because due to, say, for example, cost implications, then we were going to look at how did you develop your subject for study for the purposes of reaching them. Because it's important for you as a researcher to start thinking simple, local first, and then you can build it up. You are in UNISA, now you want to go and study students at Stellenbosch University. It might be difficult for you to get them to participate in your study, because you have to reach out to them. Will it be appropriate to select a sample? You need to ask yourself, do I need a sample? Or if so, how will you do that? So for example, is it the number, is it such that it requires you to have a sample? And if so, how are you going to do the selection of your sample? If there's any possibility that your research will affect those you study, how will you ensure that the research does not harm them? Now, those are the ethical considerations. So if you know the research that you're going to do, you're going to test people on whether this vaccine works, and so on and so on. The question then is, how will you ensure that the research does not harm them? Measurement is another element. What are the key variables in your study? So in other words, what are those variables that you are going to measure in your study, and how do you define and measure them? So you have to define concepts, so that when we read your study, we need to be able to see how you define them, because your definition may not necessarily be the same as the definition in the general sphere, or in the general scientific community space. So you need to give us how do you define something? Do your definitions and measurement method duplicate or differ from those of the previous research on this topic? So the concept might be that you're defining it, and maybe you're defining the same way as it was defined by the previous researchers, or you're defining it in the new way that it's not a duplicate of, or is different from how it was defined previously. If you have already developed your measurement device, for example, a measurement device in this case is a questionnaire, or will you be using something previously developed by others? It might be appropriate to include a copy in an appendix to your proposal. So if, for example, you're going to use a questionnaire, or you're going to use an interview guide or whatever, it's you now who must develop it, and you need to guide. Was it previously developed by others that you're adapting it yourself? And if so, you just have to include it in your proposal. Okay, let me just go back to the question that I want to ask. For some of you who have already done the proposal, at this point of a questionnaire or a measurement instrument, what is it that you can share with us? What was your experience, or what is your thinking, or what's your opinion now? Remember, we are not giving you an allocation of a mark. I just want to get your personal experiences.
Oh, I think for me, your tool, whether a questionnaire or a measuring instrument, should talk to exactly to what you're trying to do, so that those are your objectives. So those should be aligned. If you are going to measure or going to ask a specific question, your questionnaire should find a way around that question, even if it's not exact, but it should inform you exactly to what you are asking.
So what was, have you already done one or not yet?
Yeah, I've done my proposal. So
how did you experience that part?
So I'm looking at the effectiveness of a technique with ecological rehabilitation. So I'm looking at how soil can be improved. So I look at the soil qualities. So my objectives would be to look at the soil qualities after the soil has been disturbed and after the technique I've used. So I just look at its soil quality analysis.
So you're looking at it before and the after.
And after, yeah, after the technique that I've used, and just after it was disturbed. So when it was disturbed, and after I've used the technique to revitalize it, and then I look at the soil quality.
Is it so it's experimental? Is it experimental design?
Yeah, it's an experimental design.
Okay, but then,
so
but when
my point
I just want to check something. Maybe let me see if my question is clear. When you go to the questionnaire designing, when you're putting together a questionnaire or a tool that you're going to use, how did you find that experience?
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of reading, because you have to look at what other people have done before, and then also what you have in your concept, what you're trying to do, and what other people have done, and then you use that to see what would be the best tool for what you want to do and your objectives.
Okay.
So it takes a lot of reading. So that's what I can share.
Okay. Good. Let me see others who might have gone through that process and they can share maybe with us. Believe, what is your how did you experience, or what is your experience, or what do you think will be your experience as you get into the questionnaire or tool that you're going to develop for data collection?
Yeah, I haven't gone through that process, but I think that's the process that is making me to get scared a little bit as to how many people will respond to my questionnaire, or as to how I will develop the questionnaire itself, to make sure that every objective has been covered on the questionnaire. But the most important part that makes me get scared about this is the response that probably I will get after posting the questionnaire or sending the questionnaire to respondents or targeted respondents. So
okay.
That's what I think.
Okay. And remember your thinking, and therefore you need to start mitigating that, because it's a possible risk that you are raising, and more studying and more looking into how others have done it will be helpful.
Yes, truly speaking, I am also thinking of probably if I have got a sample of 100, then I have to make an additional 50 to at least reach my sample, or even having 200, so that even if I have more respondents, then it will help me to cover my sample frame that I have selected.
You see, you see that's important. I mean, I'm thinking you are already thinking ahead. But let me hear what others have to say. If the Chilizi, what was your, or what is your opinion on this matter?
For me, okay, I've done my proposal, but now that I actually need to start collecting my data, okay, well, I'm working with phytoremediation potential of a certain plant to see if it will be able to absorb cadmium or lead, and that has already been done. So then my niche was that I wanted to see how would the decomposing material would have an effect on the earthworms. So now I need to collect soil, and I'm going to need tools to do that, because I'll be digging for like 13 centimeters. And when I get that soil, I'll have to analyze the physical, chemical parameters of that before and after. And there are also seeds that I also need to get, and they also say that they need to be verified. So at the moment, because I'm about to do that practically, it's still a bit confusing and all. But then the only thing that I know is that for me to go and collect soil, I need to get the tools, which could either be the spade or the other agar tube. And it still also has to be that green effect working in the lab and at UNISA there. So just the practical part of it, of doing it, that's where I'm at. So all of this, when it comes together, it becomes a lot to break down and all. So yeah.
Okay, you're already touching on systematic observation, because and also the measurement that they must not be contaminated as you collect the soil and the plant and all those are your subjects, isn't it?
Yes.
You'll be talking to the soil, you'll be talking to the measurements, then you'll be taking it into a space where you're going to observe it and systematically analyze it, all those kind of things.
Yes, because I'll have to grow the seeds in the contaminated soil. And also for the second part, whereby there's earthworms, I'll have to artificially make up soil, which I haven't done that. So I heard that the other person, I think prior to this one, said that you read a lot of information. So you still read, but then you don't have the experience of doing that. Yeah. So that's where you need to be communicating with the supervisor.
The transition. Remember, the transition is you read so that you do it and you experience it yourself, and you make mistakes by yourself, and that's why you are guided.
Okay.
Now that sounds interesting to for all of you, because it simply then suggests to us that we are going to get a different type of research designs as we go along. I'm already picking up experimental research design somewhere. The control, the independent, the dependent variable concept as we're talking. So that's going to be quite interesting. But remember, at the end of the day, it's you who's going to do that systematic observation. It's you who's going to do that collection of data, whatever the data is. And it's also you who's going to do the analysis. And it's you then who's going to tell us how your findings are in relation to the problem that you were dealing with. So it really sounds very exciting. I also like the fact that in one of the concept that we are discussing is that there will be the before and the after. How many times do some of us take the weight loss products where they show you this is what was before, and you have to measure it and have it the correct elements of the before, and then you say this is the after, the Hlasela Mafuta products, for example, that you were like this before, now you are like this. So we need to know what was the measurement before. So when you take that soil, we need to see it in its original character, shape, and form. And then you show us after there was an intervention, as to what then became of it afterwards. So it's going to be very interesting when we talk about dependent and independent variables. Surely we will hear a lot of exciting information there. So I'm quite happy about the combination of the students that we have, and I'm sure there's a lot of of learning that we'll all take home. So please engage us more, because I think it's helpful when we do that. Now, and I'm sure the other thing that we are picking up there in terms of subjects already, believe you can hear that these subjects on the other side is just going to be the things, the what, not the whom. So in other words, they will be taking soil. They're talking to soil as a subject of study. We also talk to people as subject of study. We also talk to so you see do you see that wealth of experience that is beginning to tell us when we talk subject for study. I hope you are picking up that as we go along.
I'm sorry, can I ask something?
Yes, please do.
I'm not sure what to call it, but can I call it bias when you have an objective, but your mind sort of leans towards that objective? How do you deal with that? So that
How do you deal with, you mean how do you deal with bias?
Yeah, because sometimes people go into a study already convinced, like with an example of phytoremediation, it's well known that cabbages, like broccoli, cabbages, and other cauliflower, they do phytoremediate. So you go into a study already with that thinking, and you don't find that at the end. So how do you deal with that bias in your writing?
You deal with it as bias. I mean, you look at bias and you can also put in a hypothesis. There will be ways that we're going to talk to. I mean, we're going to talk to reliabilities, validities, but research bias is there, as always. So what you then going to do is that you're going to say, how do you deal with research bias in your study? So we need to know what are the tools that you can apply. But remember as well that bias is not necessarily wrong on its own. It's just that we need to know how do you mitigate against either your own bias or the bias by others before us. That is why at times, it's not worth it to disturb the discipline piece that they've already established, because then they start, we call it, you upset the apple cart. So yes, just keep in mind the element of bias throughout the cursing. When we get to the issues of research bias, we will see whether some of these instruments can assist you as you go along. But yes, there is an element of research bias in research. You will just have to keep that in mind as we go along, so that we talk about it as well. Well, is that fine?
Yeah. Thank you. But I was more worried about the bias that you're not even aware of. But you sort of lean towards an idea, but you're not even aware that it can mess up your study because you believe in it.
Well,
Believe so much.
what do you mean? What do you mean you are not aware of it?
So let's say you with your example of Itlasela Mafuta, you are using it, and your results are not what you expected, but you want them to be what you expected.
Yes. So basically, you are manipulating the results to suit the outcome, because remember, Hlasela Mafuta is and I've got no problem with it, but remember, it's a marketing it's a marketing strategy. So we want more people to use this product. The extent to which it will Hlasela Mafuta is irrelevant, because they are not necessarily looking at it that way. So I'm saying I agree with you that you need to know that certain processes are manipulated for a purpose. So if you say, well, I'm not aware, you're doing, there's a research bias that you're not aware, I want to I'm not sure I understand, because the marketing research would say, I've got a product, I've got a McDonald's product that I want to market, and therefore I sponsor Brazil World Cup and I start promoting the product. It does not necessarily mean there is quality of health in the burgers in McDonald's, but there is more sales of the burgers, isn't it? So if I'm looking for more sales and I've gone to do research on how to increase sales, then I start saying, okay, maybe I should introduce more children-related things to attract children. It doesn't necessarily, it's not talking to the quality of the health of the product. So the biasness there is, some people then want to talk to you about the fact that McDonald's is not healthy. But that is not what it was then meant to be. What it was meant to be is to increase sales. So when I'm looking at increasing sales, I'm not going to worry about whether or not is quality of health, because that will be a different matter. I'm not going to worry about the salt intake and the oil and stuff, because that is a different debate. I hope you follow there's nothing wrong with people then saying, I want to sell my product, and what is my niche that I want to attack. So when they then come up with their own niche, you ask them the wrong question when you start asking about their health concerns, because it was not, they were not designing something to improve the quality of health. They were designing something to increase sales. I hope you follow me.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I want you to understand as researchers as well that research is not completely innocent. If I want to increase sales of alcohol in the country of South Africa, I am not going to target the people who are against alcohol. I'm going to target the new market, because I want new people to take my product. And the more people take my product, the more sales I will increase. So sometimes you hear the debates are misplaced, because people then are arguing a health problem on an economic platform, and therefore there is just a mismatch. If I want to increase my sales, and I'm talking alcohol, I'm going to target people at a particular LSM, so that they can join the business and the business can grow. But then you are then going to come up with a moral argument about the fact that there's more people taking alcohol in the country. But then, so what? Because your argument now is about saying my objective of increasing the sales has been achieved, because I want maybe 30% of South African to take alcohol. Now, if I get 30% or more, I have achieved the objective eventually, and therefore I'm in good business. Now, your argument there should at least go and read what the research and their methodologies and all those things were all about, so that then you can follow that, and maybe you can counter that, whatever you want to do. But that's just that. Those are just examples that we can talk about. And remember, I said research, anything can be studied. The two colleagues have already said to even soil is live and it can be studied. So nothing cannot be studied, because it's just the nature of the beast that we are involved in at the moment. Okay, let's see if we can still continue with our elements of research. When you get to data collection, you have to ask yourself again the methods that you're going to follow. In other words, how will you actually collect the data for your study? What kind of instruments are you going to use to collect the data? And for every instrument that you use, you have to have a theoretical foundation. Remember, in research, if you say I'm going to use instrument Y, you back it up with theory and literature. So you explain why are you choosing X over Y. So you don't just choose it because it's there for you for the taking. You choose it and you explain. Now, will you conduct an experiment or will you do a survey? And from what I'm hearing from other researchers in this platform is that some of you will be doing experiments, some of you will be doing surveys. Will you undertake a field research? In other words, will you go in the field, Or will you focus on the reanalysis of statistics already created by others, where you take the statistics, you sit in front of your computer and you work around it? Perhaps you'll use more than one method. So those are the questions you must ask yourself. There could be more, remember. So the question is, as you ask yourself these questions, you are beginning to think through your data collection methods. So in other words, you are beginning to think, what will I need? So you're preparing yourself for the journey ahead. You don't get into data collection and it's like, oops, by the way, what am I looking for here? And then, because otherwise then you go to the field with wrong tools, and you realize when people are in front of you, or when you have now you are in front of a phenomenon, and now you are frustrated because you don't have the right tools for your study. So it's important for you to spend time by yourself thinking about, what tools will I need? So the more you ask those questions, the more it's like a checklist. The more you realize, okay, maybe I don't need this because it's going to be expensive. Because at the end of the day, it will also tell you whether there are cost implications, and where then the costs are huge and you reduce them. You explain that yourself, that it would have cost you this, and therefore you opted for that. So the reason for you going for a cheaper option is a research reason. It makes sense. So you explain that, and you tell those who are interested in your study to know. An analysis, for example, you indicate the kind of analysis you plan to conduct. You spell out the purpose and the logic of your analysis. Are you interested in precise description, or do you intend to explain why things are the way they are? So that in other words, it goes back to what? The purpose of research. Do you plan to account for variations in some quality? For example, why students are more liberal than others? Because there might be variations in some quality. When you study soil, those variations, that there was a before, the quality was like this, the next time you look at it, this is how it looks. Those artificial creation of earthworms, it needs to also be described, because there might be variations in some of those qualities. So all those are the things that when we read your report, we need to see as well. What are the possible explanatory variables will your analysis consider? And how will you know if you've explained variations adequately? Those are the analysis to say, well, at what point do you start and at what point do you end? Because you don't just analyze and analyze and analyze until you've reached a paralysis of analysis. So you need to get to a point where you say, I'll analyze up to this point, and then I'll stop and do something else. You tell us that in your reporting as well, as to where did you start and where did you stop. It's important also to have a schedule. A schedule is often appropriate because it provides for the various stages of your research. How long will it take for you to do a proposal? How long for you to do your aims? How long is it going to take for you to do literature review, and so on and so? So you need to have a schedule that tells you how long you're going to take in all these various stages. Even if you don't do this for the proposal, you have to do it yourself. As a student, you need to already know how long will it take for you to do all those stages. Some, remember, steps will take long, others may not take as long. Some you'll have total control over yourself, others you might be dependent on others. So it's important for you to have some kind of a schedule. Unless you have a timeline for accomplishing the several stages, like as a student, you might be required to submit at a particular time. So because you already know that you are going to submit at a particular time, you build your schedule around that. Because if you don't have that schedule, it might be, keeping track of how you're doing might be difficult yourself. So you need to have that kind of a schedule. A budget is important. When you ask someone to cover your research costs, for example, you need to provide that person with a budget that specifies where the money will go. Where would you be spending? If you're going to be spending somebody else's money, you need to then be able to show where will you be spending money on. So you need to explain and outline all those stages and check which one will consume more money and which one will be less expensive. Because large and expensive projects include budgetary categories, such as people that you are going to pay, computers that maybe you are going to need, supplies and telephones that you are going to use, and the postage if you are going to be sending questionnaires as well. Well, this is in the olden days where people would then send self-stamped envelopes, because when you give a participant a questionnaire, you don't expect them to spend money for you to return it. So as a researcher, it's advisable that you pay for the postage, and you make things easy for everybody. Even for a project you'll pay for yourself. Even for a project where you will pay yourself, it's a good idea to spend some time anticipating the expenses, because even as a student, there are expenses that you incur. For example, photocopying, office supplies, storage devices, telephone calls, Wi-Fi, connectivity now, and so on. So there is a budget that you're spending when you call, when you send, and when you connect now. All those are budgetary processes. So research is not necessarily free or cheap. So you need to have a budget, because possibly right now some of you are using family resources. So you need to be able to put that, and for tax purposes, you can also then claim tax, because these are expenses that you are incurring as you do your work. Now, when you are sponsored, all those things they do matter. Do we have questions on the elements or so far, or we are good? Any comment? Is there a comment? I haven't heard anything from Noltando. Noltando, what is your comment thus far?
Good morning, Doc, and good morning to the colleagues. Thank you. I think for me, I'm still quite new at this, so I'm still just absorbing everything. It's quite interesting with what you have mentioned about the fact that when it comes to the budget, that you're saying that we don't necessarily have to add it on the research proposal, but we have to have it as part of the planning. So my question would be then, if you don't have it as part of your research proposal, would you not encounter a problem when you have to defend your proposal, when they ask about the costs? Let's say it gets to a point where the money that you need might go beyond your own pocket, and then are there processes now then of getting funding once you are in the program? Thank you.
Okay, the budget, well, it depends on who the proposal is meant for, right? That's important to note. If you are doing a proposal for a company that wants to do like sensors, for example, your proposal is going to have the budget, because you need to know how many enumerators do we need, how many computers must we buy, and so forth and so forth. So the budget is important. But I think for the purpose of being a student, your proposal does not include a budget that you submit as part of the proposal. But you can have that budget that you draw for yourself, because I'm saying nothing is for free as you study. It's like your own schedule. Other promoters will want the schedule so that they can be able to monitor the progress that you're making. Others don't necessarily need a schedule. So you have to have a schedule just so that you monitor yourself, because it also helps you that in future, when you do proposals and you are going to ask for funding, then you know how to how to cost it.
Mhm.
Remember, in some instances, we employ people who are going to capture or collect data. So they are field workers that you employ. In some instances, you employ people who are going to do your data analysis. In some instances, you employ people who are going to edit your report, your research report and so forth. So there are stages where you really pay a lot of money to get the research report. But that is just to amplify the point that it depends on who wants it and who doesn't want it. Believe I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Okay, on the same note of a budget, my question is this budget that we are preparing is the budget for the research that we are doing after the proposal. Am I correct? Or we are actually budgeting for the proposal itself? What are we budgeting for here? Are we budgeting for the research that we will do after the proposal?
I'm not sure I understood you well, but let me see if I do, and you can correct me if I'm not.
Okay.
When remember, a proposal is just you now putting an idea into paper. So in that you are not doing any research yet. You are just putting a plan to say you want to conduct research. So let me give you an example. ESCOM wants someone who's coming to study the impact of load shedding on small business impact, whatever, right? So when you then put that proposal, are you going to put a budget in it or you're not going to put a budget in it?
We are going to put a budget in it.
You're putting a budget in it because you want to submit to ESCOM to say the total cost of doing this research. Because remember, proposal is you telling me the shape and the character of the research that you're going to do.
Yeah.
So then that's the proposal. So a proposal, therefore, may include the budget in this case because you are giving this proposal to a company that must pay you for the work that you're going to do.
Oh.
Alternatively, if you just going to submit it as a student, you can put a budget, but it may not necessarily be required because it's part of you studying and therefore is built into your own costs as a student. So you're not submitting to anybody because nobody's going to reimburse you for your costs. So in that case, it might be that the institution, UNISA, for example, may not necessarily want an item on budget in your proposal because it is considered that it is built already in your costs for studies. But you need to have that yourself because you are going to spend money during research itself, not at the proposal level. Because at the proposal level, you're still putting it together. But during research, you yourself, you're going to spend money because maybe you're going to develop a questionnaire or you're going to go get an instrument where you collect data, you interpret data, you do all those things, you print your documents, you capture them on your computer and so forth and so forth. So for that purpose, I'm saying you need to have your own budget because then you learn at the very early stages on how to cost research. Otherwise, then the proposal is just purely for academic purposes where you submit it to a lecturer, but you will still incur costs. Basically, I think the point I'm trying to say is whether or not you have a budget or you don't have a budget, you're going to incur costs. Amongst other costs is that the amount of money that you're spending now connecting to this program. It's a cost on its own. On the budget, can I just check? Is it Tony Fani? Are you on the platform? How much do you think you will incur, an estimate, when you do your research as a student? If somebody was to come to you now, NSFAS was to say, I want to pay you to do the research as per your proposal for now. You have not done the budgeting, but how much do you think it will cost you? And just share with me why.
For me, if I were to be asked that question, only fair enough because I've done the first part. I would say roughly 25,000, I think. Saying that due to the fact that with my research, there are chemicals that I need to buy and different of them. And there are also seeds, and I also have to take the seeds for verification as well. And also some of the tools, not knowing if the lab currently has that or if we are allowed to share what other previous people have done, including what the others were saying, like for editing and all that. I would mount it to roughly that.
Yeah, you see, that's important. But what about you don't do paper, telephone calling, and all those kind of things?
No, my research does not require me to do that.
How are you going to write the report?
Well, I've got my own PC and all that. Like, remember, mine is field work. So whatever that I do and test and analyze, I take that and I put it in. And so that amount also includes
it includes the analysis, the report writing.
Yes, and also because I know that UNISA already is allowing me to do my test there. So I just don't know in terms of that program that I need to use for statistical I don't know what it's called, the SSPS. I've never done it, so I would not know how much it costs. Like, so
there's licensing. There's an issue of licensing there.
Also, traveling to site.
But I think the point. Remember, what is the point? The point we are just saying, it's important for you to draw your own budget so that you start seeing where are the costs if you were to do it for a company or for for somebody else as well. So this is just an example, and not necessarily the real case study. So I hope you get the message. Kusing, I see your hand. Now you want to comment. You can go ahead.
Oh no, I just wanted to add if estimates include, because she said it's filled with traveling to site, equipment that she's going to use on site, PPE, whatever she's gonna need to wear and carry the samples, if the 25,000 was considering all of those things.
Yes, you see that is just you now saying you need to first analyze not analyze, maybe analyze is a wrong way, but you need to first itemize everything that you're gonna need in the research process, so that you don't come back later and say, oops, sorry, I forgot to put this in the budget and so on. But this is just to show you that at the proposal level, that is where you do everything that you need. In other words, that's where you state everything that you want, so that when you do costing, then you know everything is in there. Whether or not you're going to be paid for everything, that's something else. But you should not, as a researcher, start from a point where you start from zero and you think, well, I won't get anything. You basically have to start and say, maybe I'm not going to be the one doing the collection. I'm going to get how many people to go and collect the information. Those people might have rates that you need to put in and pay them. Because remember, you can also pay for people to go and collect data for you. Now, you can then have someone who you will put on your payroll to analyze this data for you, because you are overseeing every stage is going for. So I'm not saying do it that way, but I'm saying it's options that you will have to play around with. So eventually you'd say, you know what, my research is actually worth 200,000, for example. And if it's worth 200,000, then the person who's then pay you says, well, I can't pay that much. Now you then begin to start cutting costs and say, okay, maybe instead of using this, I'll use that. Instead of using my phone, I'll use free Wi-Fi, whatever. You start now working on the budget that is been given to you. But as a person, as a researcher, you need to have a budget. You definitely need to have a budget. Okay, but that was just an example, Chilis, and we were just we happy that we used that example. And now, Messi, are you back on now?
Yes, I'm back on.
Okay, you were still talking before you could not finish your point because you got disrupted. Go ahead.
Yes, I was like talking about the budget of the research. Like I've write the proposal to the one that's supposed to fund me about the research. But my problem was like I didn't know how much is gonna be needed because when I estimate it needed me to have plus or minus 30,000. So now as I'm busy with it, then I've seen that I've undercharged the what called the expenses that I was expecting to do. So for now, that's my challenge that I have to reduce all the things that I need to do. And this, I think, is a threat for me to do this. But I don't know what to do anymore.
Oh, okay. I think you've just raised another. Thanks for that. You've raised another important point that is not only a research-related problem. Undercoating seems to be generally a big problem in South Africa, especially on big capital projects. Because what people tend to do in the initial stages of their lives is to start saying, well, I need 30,000 because you're desperately looking for a job at times.
Exactly.
To build that bridge, to build this bridge, I'll need 30,000. Then you realize when you itemize things that just the soil, Chilizi is going to cost you X amount of money to test the soil and whether or not you can put this kind of a bridge in such and such in a soil like that. Now you realize actually 30,000 was just for testing of the soil because you want 25,000, and then projects don't then move on. So I think we will also be well advised as researchers to have those people who look at these undercoating across the board. Other people even go to an extent of undercoating at the SARS level that they don't even put in tax in their budgeting. So the money comes to me and I take all of it and I don't pay tax. So because you don't build tax into your cost. And as a result, I'm saying this is a big problem. And I'm sure some of you or some of your fellow students will take it at some point and tell us why is it that is so common that there's undercoating. Part of the service delivery incomplete projects really are to do with not only with corruption, but also with the fact that people have undercoated. Now they realize midway in when they are doing the project that, well, I was just not cheap, the cheapest option taken, but I've actually undercoated because I have to pay daily rates for people to go work there. Now I can't. I did not factor in the fact that there's a fluctuation of fuel daily, monthly. And therefore now fuel has gone up to 25 rands and I worked on 18 rands. So those are the things that perhaps I think you raised a very important point. And as researchers, you need to be aware of them. Yes, there are things that you say they are free, but you realize in the bigger scheme of things that actually nothing is free. To develop and send a questionnaire is not free. But it may look free because this is a group of friends that I just want them to fill up. So pricing and undercoating in this country is a big problem. So but thanks for raising that. And I'm sure when you say it's a big problem, you must remember that iterative 7 steps of research process to say, oops, there seems to be another problem that we can look at and aim. We can have an aim of it. We can go and do literature around it, and then we can go and have a research design about it. We go and we collect data, and you can collect data on all the failed projects, and then you analyze and you give a report, a research report, then you've got a solution to some of the problems that the country has. Good luck. Let's then proceed with our project for today. We have spoken about inductive logic, but we just have to repeat it. That when you talk inductive logic, really, it is that logic that deals with drawing conclusion from data or observation. Is the primary logical method upon which science is based. Now, I'm just looking at what we are doing now is that there are those of you who are going to draw conclusions from the data or from the observations that you are currently working on. So with this kind of logic, you draw generalizable inferences out of observation. So you observe the soil over time, or you observe the phenomenon over time, and then you start drawing those generalizable inferences. But you draw them from the observation. So you have to have that systematic observation so that you can begin to formulate those inferences. This kind of reasoning begin not with a pre-established truth. So you don't go there already with truth. So you basically don't know what you are going to get, the before and the after, or assumptions, but instead with an observation. So you don't go there cruising and say, yeah, I know that this soil now is no longer. You don't go there with any pre-established truth. Or any assumption. That's the difference. So immediately when you are saying you're going to do it, I then know that it's not. You don't have the truth. You are going to establish it. So you're going to come out with it. So they observe a sample, and then they draw conclusion about the larger population. So you take that soil as your sample, you observe it over a period of time, you engage it, and then you can draw conclusions, about the larger population from which the sample has been taken. And remember, you are only going to make that conclusion to the larger population from where the sample has been taken. So if you take a particular climate, soil based on a certain climate, you are only going to make conclusion on that population, not on everybody else. So you can't study people in Mpumalanga, or the murder that happened in Mpumalanga, and you generalize it to a murder that happened in Soweto. It may not necessarily be generalizable in that way. So that's why you need a sample, and that sample you are only going to be able to draw conclusion about the larger population from that sample that you have drawn it from. I hope it makes sense. Now here you move from the particular, so you've got a particular situation that you are dealing with, to the general. So you then say, if this is what I'm seeing here is anything to go by, it means everything else will look the same. So you move the general from a set of specific observations to the discovery of pattern that represents some degree of order. So in other words, what you do, you then look at it and say, if the people in this area are behaving in this way, and you're drawing that from a sample of 100 that you spoke about earlier, Kusin, then the representation of that 100, you can generalize to the broader population only of the 100 that you're talking about. So if you draw a sample from a particular population, you generalize only insofar as that population is concerned. Now, sometimes you hear people generalizing and saying, Pedis, Xhosas, Afrikaners are like this, and we'll talk about generalization when we're dealing with issues of sampling as well. But it's not advisable as a researcher to generalize unless you have had certain requirements that you have met of sampling. We will deal with that when we deal with sampling. On the other hand, Deductive logic just looks at the nature of the relationship between theory and research. It's based on what is known about the particular domain, and you as a researcher, you deduce a hypothesis that must then be subjected to empirical scrutiny. So in other words, if you go and you're doing a deductive logic, you're applying a deductive logic to your research, you're then going to formulate a hypothesis. A hypothesis, therefore, can be that pre-established truth that you want to do, where you then go already with a pre-established view, and you use that as a basis upon which you engage. So you can do that, then that then becomes deductive. So it begins with why and moves to whether, whereas induction doesn't do that. It moves in the opposite direction as to the what. It provides the basis for mathematical proofs in mathematics, physics, and related disciplines. So it's more, relevant for mathematical proofs, physics, and related disciplines. But it is very valuable to generate the research hypothesis and testing theories. So you've got theories that you can then use to test on using the deductive logic. Because we have already spoken about it, I'm just simply going to see if I can skip that quickly. Then there is an issue around research ethics, very, very important. When you select participants that are going to be part of your research, you must ensure that you provide them with full information about the purpose and their use, because they're going to contribute to your study. You need to be honest, and you must keep participants informed about the expectations topic. Do not pressure them to speak if they don't want to speak, and they need to be encouraged to keep confidential what they hear during the meeting. And researchers have the responsibility to anonymize data from the group. So in other words, what it means is I don't have to tell people who I got the information from, because then I must just indicate that I got it from so I can have identification that does not begin to tell who is the person that I spoke to. Some of the principles of the research ethics that you must be familiar with, you've already dealt with that, I'm sure, is about voluntary participation and informed participation. A major tenet of research ethics really is that experimental participation must be voluntary. No one should be forced to participate. When research involves public documents or records, for example, that human beings have previously created, such as certificates, birth certificates, newspaper articles, internet websites, such documents are generally considered to be fair game for research investigation. So those ones are public records. So you probably would not apply the same principles of voluntary participation in them, other than perhaps proper referencing. People recruited for participation in research study should be told the nature of the study that is to be conducted, and should be given the choice of either they are participating or not participating. So when you go and you engage, you probably involving people, you need to ask their permission to participate. And increasingly, the ethical norms of voluntary participation and the no harm to participants have become formalized in the concept of informed consent. So what we are seeing now is that some people are given a form, which basically form is to encourage voluntary participation and the no harm to participants. So it is important that is also taken note of. Protection from harm. Sorry?
Sorry. When going back to voluntary participation, when you incentivize people for a questionnaire or for participating in a study, how does that part of the ethics deal with that part of incentivizing people? I pay you for a for you to complete a survey?
Well, there's a fine line there. You can do that, but you need to be mindful of something called inducement. Inducement meaning you pay people to participate, but you can give people a token of appreciation for participating there in your research without really paying them, but maybe giving them something, a voucher, because people, you can incentivize people, but you just have to make sure that it's also built into your proposal upfront, that you will incentivize them, and the incentive that incentivization must be reasonable, and it must not call for then people starting to fighting for their participation, because the principles of who you are selecting should still be applied. Yes, there's a difference between inducement and incentivization, but I'm sure that will, when we get into a chapter on research ethics, we will go deeper into that.
Oh, okay, thank you. Because I was about to ask, where's the line then?
Oh, okay. No, you can. All I'm saying is that you must say it up front in your research proposal before it gets approved. And remember, there is an research ethics structures that you must also report to, so that they can then give a thumbs up to what you are the incentive is all about.
Thank you.
Yeah. Protection from harm or no harm to the participants. You should not expose research participants, whether they are humans or non-human animals, to any physical or psychological harm. I'm not sure about the soil actually and cursing, whether you can get into this space. When a study involves human beings, the general rule of thumb is that the risk involved in participating in a study should not be appreciatively greater than the normal risk of day-to-day life. So people, you know, when I do your study, it must not interfere with my it must just be, less than the risk that I live and I deal with every day. So participants should not risk losing their lives, their limb, or should they be subjected to unusual stress, embarrassment, or loss of esteem. So I mustn't, when I participate in your research, feel like that you've brought stress in my life, you've embarrassed me, or you've made me lose my self-esteem. You must just collect data in the most respectful way. Right to privacy. Any research study involving human beings must respect participants' right to privacy. Under no circumstances should a research report, either oral or written, be presented in such a way that other people become aware of how a particular participant has responded or has behaved, unless, of course, the participant has specifically granted permission in writing for this to happen. Sometimes what a participant will do is, I'm fine if you can quote me for as long as I don't give you permission then to use my name. So then you use pseudonyms. That's where you anonymize the information. So you don't know where it comes from, but it is actually the right information. So generally, as a researcher, you must keep the nature and the quality of individual participants' performance strictly confidential. So their information must be confidential. We shouldn't know. You should not disrespect their right to privacy. The protection of the subject when it comes to anonymity and confidentiality is that the protection of the subject's interest and their well-being is the protection of their identity, especially in survey research. We shouldn't know, again, who the participant is, but you can tell us what they say on a matter. If revealing their survey responses would injure them in any way, adherence to this norm becomes all the more important. So in other words, if you are going to talk about the situation that is going to reveal who the participant is or it's going to injure them in any way, then it's even more important to keep their names and their information confidential and anonymous. Anonymity is achieved in research projects when neither the researcher nor the readers of the findings can identify a given response with a given respondent. So if I cannot see and identify the response with a particular respondent, then we say you have achieved anonymity. So a research project guarantees confidentiality when the researcher can identify a given person's response, but promises not to do so publicly. So it's important that you understand these principles of research ethics, because there are moments where there is difficulties with compliance with the Research Ethics Committee. Maybe then that brings me to the question that I wanted to ask on how do you think this principle act in South Africa at the moment? The research ethics process and the theory thereof. How do you think it squares up to the Research Ethics Committee? The POPIA Act. You've all heard about the POPIA Act by now. So let's see how do you see is there a relation, or you don't see any relationship at all?
In relation to ethics?
Yeah, the POPIA Act in relation to research ethics.
Oh, research ethics. I think it will be that it's much more about the protection of the information. So to be ethical in the process of conducting a research, or when you do the research, should just be mindful to say that you should not infringe other people's rights or privacy and all of that. I do not. Yeah, that's how far I can think.
Okay. So do you think the two have any form of relationship or not?
Yes, I think yes, it should be maybe respecting other people's privacy. It should be important in the process. You should be ethical with regard to that. You should respect other people's privacy, or comply with the act as it suggests how the information should be handled, information that is considered to be personal.
True.
But I think maybe it has to do with how you're going to process the data. So maybe you put that in your consent form, that what are you going to use the data for and how are you going to keep it? And you suggest all of that in the consent form. And the act itself deals with how you process the data and how you store the data and for how long you're going to store that data. So maybe you will be upfront with that on the consent form, and then you do as you've said, that I'm not going to say.
So would you say there is a relationship between the research ethics and the POPIA Act, as far as you can?
Yes, there is. There's no separating them, because you have to be ethical with people's information or data. And being ethical means you are going to follow that act. You are going to abide by the act.
Okay. Messi?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. For now, I don't know what to add. So, but about the ethics, I think the researcher need to follow university ethical issues, so we can go ahead with the research to be successful.
How many of you, maybe let me also ask this question. How many of you had, if you are going to do research, have received ethical clearance or clearances? I know that it might be still early in the day on that, but how many of you have received clearances for your research, or you are not there yet?
As for me, I'm not there yet.
I have.
Okay. You had received clearance.
Ethical clearance. Yeah.
What does essentially what does it say? I mean, you don't have to read it word for word.
It talks about not introducing new or foreign species into the environment, because I'm working with soil and grasses. And it talks about, I will also work with microbes, so not introducing microbes that are not soil based, or so it just talks about protecting the environment. There's no animals, there's no humans, so it's very limited. It's not that big compared to the ones that would have humans or human blood.
Yes. So if there was animals and there were humans, I'm sure it could have been even much more elaborate.
Yeah, it would be more broad. It talk about human rights, animal rights, and protecting people's blood and all of that. But mine is just the environment.
Why okay, thanks, Kusi. Why is it important? And again, I'm throwing this to everybody. Why is it important that there must be ethical clearance when you do research? Why do you think it's we need that clearance? Yes, you've got a proposal. Now you are given a clearance. Why do you think it's important to get clearance? You are not there yet, but why do you think it will be important when you get there to get clearance? What is your opinion? Anyone can comment on that.
Hello again. Okay, I think for me, the first thing that comes to mind would be the Stanford prison experiment. That with such a thing, it turned out to be unethical, and it had long-lasting impact on the people who were involved in it. So you need to look at that. Like how will this study affect people on a personal capacity? And that's where the ethics come in. If it's going to affect people for long term, for example, or if it's going to have a negative impact, then you won't get the ethical clearance. But then that's the importance of it. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Anybody else? Let's just wrap up quickly on the ethical issues. Honesty with professional colleagues. You are a researcher. When I say researchers, I mean you. You must then report your findings in a complete, honest fashion without misrepresenting what they have done or intentionally misleading others about the nature of their findings. Earlier on, somebody was asking about the biasness. So bias can also be unethical. Under no circumstances should the researcher fabricate data to support a particular conclusion, no matter how seemingly noble that conclusion might be. Again, I'm saying, remember, you can use ethical considerations as a control measure for your research, for biasness. Such an action, in other words, such an action where you fabricate data, constitutes scientific fraud, plain and simple. So in other words, you're committing fraud scientifically there. So don't do that. Deception, for example, is when you're deceiving people, you are unethical. Deception within social research needs to be justified by compelling scientific or administrative concerns. So in other words, where you want to apply deception, you need to justify why you are doing that. There are conditions and circumstances where you can use deception if they are compelling scientific and administrative concerns. I mean, I can just imagine, certain circumstances, like recently in South Africa, there is this view that you're a whistleblower or you're a politician, you are likely to be killed because of the toxicity of the situation we find ourselves in. Those of you who are politicians, I'm sure you know how dangerous is it now to become a politician. So sometimes there must be compelling, as they would say, compelling scientific. It must not just be compelling opinions, compelling scientific or administrative concerns why you're doing it. But other than that, you don't do it. Let's just wrap up and see points that we should keep in mind as we close this session. I just want you to keep in mind that the iterative research process and the steps are important. You need to be familiar with that. Those elements of the research that we spoke about, very, very critical. Again, the inductive, excuse the spelling there, is supposed to be inductive and deductive logic. Very important, because as you put in your hypothesis, we need to know, is it applicable in the deductive logic, or a hypothesis testing is applicable in the inductive logic? So you need to know that variation. And then the issues of research ethics and the theory. Those are very, very crucial principles that I thought we have covered today. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to stop here, unless if you've got questions.
Yes, Doc. I think maybe it's a stupid question or not, but anyway, I need to know, like now when I write a dissertation, how long for how many pages it's a literature review is needed for?
There are no pages that are prescribed for literature review. It's just you need to also talk to your supervisor per se. Sometimes then they just ask the number of sources that you can use. There are those who give guidance on the sources. So they would say you cannot use less than so many sources, for example. I don't know what each one of your sources will be. So so pages do not really matter. The number of sources would matter. Others will even go to an extent of telling you that you can't use sources that are too old, 10 years, younger, at least. So those are the principles that they use on the literature review. But just also bounce that with your supervisor, so that you know how many sources would you use. And when they say sources, they mean every source is counts. So whether it's a journal, whether it's a book, whether it's an electronic article, or what have you. So just check that with your specific supervisor. And again, Messi, in research, there's nothing stupid, and there's no wrong questions or answer. It always depends. I mean, I did not tell you now how many pages, but you are right. So in research, there's never something wrong. It's just where you come from in terms of your perspective.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc.
You're welcome.